The Galactic Union Council was the largest governing body in the galaxy. It ruled over hundreds of worlds and dozens of species. Its laws shaped trade, technology, and security across the stars. The Council had stood for nearly 2 centuries. But today, it faced something it had never seen before. The humans were leaving. Captain James Walker stood in the center of the massive council chamber on Argona, the Union's greatest space station. The chamber was shaped like a giant circle. Every species had a seat. Some seats were large for the towering bracken giants. Some were small for the tiny insect-like saurians. Every voice had a place. At least, that was the promise. But James knew better. He stood alone on the speaker's platform. His black uniform had the golden crest of Earth on the shoulder. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight. His blue eyes scanned the faces of the council members, looking for any sign of reason. He found none. High Chancellor Varric, leader of the Dravari species, sat in the center chair. His skin was dark gray, rough like stone. His yellow eyes were cold. Varric had led the campaign to remove humans from the council. He claimed they were selfish. He said they demanded too much power. James knew the truth. The Union had taken human knowledge, human technology, and human soldiers for decades. But when humans asked for equal say and leadership, the council turned against them. James cleared his throat and began to speak. His voice echoed in the chamber. "We warned you. Again and again. You ignored us. You called us greedy. You called us troublemakers. But we were the ones who built your defense systems. We were the ones who kept your trade routes safe. We were the ones who helped this union stand strong." He paused, letting his words sink in. He saw some council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Others looked away. Varric did not move. James continued, his voice steady. "Today, humanity leaves the Union. Not because we hate you. Not because we wish you harm. But because we refuse to be used any longer. From this day forward, Earth and all human worlds are independent. We will not send ships. We will not send supplies. You will stand on your own." The room filled with angry whispers. Some shouted that humans were cowards. Others warned that the Union would crush Earth if needed. James stood tall, unmoved by their words. Finally, Varric stood. The chamber fell silent. Varric leaned forward, gripping the edge of his seat. "You are making a mistake, Captain Walker," Varric said, his voice deep and cold. "You are not as important as you think. The Union will survive without you. We always have. We always will." James nodded slowly. He had expected this. "We'll see," he replied simply. Without waiting for permission, James turned and walked out of the chamber. The heavy doors slid open with a hiss. His officers waited outside. They followed him silently as they made their way to the docking bay. The human fleet waited in orbit. Hundreds of ships, battleships, carriers, freighters, and science vessels, all ready to leave Union space. James stepped onto the bridge of his flagship, Independence. The crew stood at attention. He gave a single order: "Take us home." The fleet turned toward human-controlled space. Engines roared to life. One by one, the ships disappeared into hyperspace. The Council watched from Argona, powerless to stop them. The galaxy had just changed forever. It had been 3 months since the humans left. At first, the Galactic Union pretended nothing had changed. The Council met daily on Argona, as they always had. Reports came in from different systems. Varric sat on his high seat, calm and proud, brushing off every concern. "We have other engineers. We have other soldiers. Let the humans go," he told the Council again and again. But the problems had already begun. The first reports were small. A few trade routes went quiet. Communication stations failed to respond. Local security forces asked for help, but the Council ignored them. Then the problems grew bigger. Human ships had handled most of the long-distance trade. They knew the safe paths through dangerous sectors. Now those ships were gone. Alien traders tried to take over the routes, but their ships were slower, older, and easier to attack. Pirates struck fast. One system after another reported hijacked cargo ships. Entire colonies were left without supplies. Food shortages began. Prices rose. Riots broke out on several worlds. Varric still refused to panic. We will adapt, he said. This is temporary. But the council started to argue. The Quarians, masters of food production, blamed the Dravari for pushing the humans out. The Varnok, who controlled ship manufacturing, demanded protection for their cargo. Small species, who relied on trade, begged the council to send military fleets. The Dravari fleets tried to answer the calls. They sent warships to protect trade routes. But without human engineers, many systems on those ships failed. The energy shields flickered. The targeting systems lagged. These systems had been built by human hands. No one else knew how to fix them. One by one, the ships returned damaged or destroyed. Pirates grew bolder. Rebel groups began taking over outposts in the outer systems. On the planet Elisar Prime, a major trade hub, the local government collapsed. People rioted in the streets. Fires burned for days. The council tried to send peacekeepers, but they arrived too late. The planet fell to a rebel faction. Panic finally reached Argona. Council members shouted over one another. Some demanded that Varric call the humans back. Others still believed they could hold the Union together without them. Varric raised his hand for silence. His face showed no fear, but his voice sounded strained. "We cannot show weakness," Varric said. "We will fix this ourselves. The Union does not need Earth." But even Varric knew the truth now. He had made a mistake too big to hide. Late one night, Varric stood alone in his private chamber. The reports from Elisar Prime played on his screen. Images of burning cities, empty supply ships, and dead soldiers flashed before his eyes. He clenched his fists. He hated to admit it, but the Union had fallen apart faster than he had imagined. The galaxy was breaking, and there was only one way to stop it. He looked at the message terminal on his desk. He had not used it since the humans left. Slowly, Varric reached out and opened a secure channel. A single name appeared on the screen: Captain James Walker. Varric took a deep breath. His pride burned inside him, but he knew what had to be done. He began to type. Captain James Walker stood on the bridge of the Independence, staring at the wide view of space in front of him. The stars stretched out like scattered diamonds. The human fleet floated in silence, guarding the borders of human-controlled space. It had been 3 long months since they had left the Galactic Union. Life among the humans had settled into a strange routine. Colonies on Mars, Titan, New Earth, and dozens of other worlds were growing without interference. Human scientists had restarted projects that the Union once blocked. Shipyards worked day and night, building faster, stronger ships. For the first time in years, humanity was truly free. And yet, James felt no peace. Every day, reports came in. His intelligence teams monitored the Union's public broadcasts. Pirate attacks, starvation on outer worlds, broken supply lines, systems shutting down, whole planets slipping into chaos. James read every report. He listened to every message. He knew what was coming. The Council had believed they could survive without humanity. They were wrong. Still, James gave no orders to intervene. He had promised his people that they would not return unless the Union admitted their mistake. Humanity would not go crawling back. Not again. Commander Elena Ruiz, his second-in-command, stepped onto the bridge. She had dark hair tied back and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She held a data pad in her hand. "More reports from the Union," she said, handing it to him. James scanned the report. The situation on Elisar Prime had worsened. Rebels had taken control of the planetary defense grid. Union ships couldn't get close without being shot down. It was a disaster. "We could take it back in 2 days," Elena said quietly, "if you give the order." James lowered the datapad. "We aren't their soldiers anymore," he replied. Elena nodded, but her face showed concern. "How long do we watch them fall apart?" James didn't answer. He walked to the viewing window and crossed his arms. He had asked himself the same question every day. Some of his officers believed they should strike now. Humanity could take control of the Union's broken systems. They could become the new rulers of the galaxy. They had the ships. They had the power. But James refused to become what the Council had accused them of. Humanity had left to build something better, not to replace the old rulers with themselves. He knew that pride had started this mess. If humanity returned now, without an invitation, it would only make things worse. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft beep from the communication terminal. Elena walked over and checked the signal. "It's from Argona," she said, sounding surprised. James turned around slowly. Put on screen. The message appeared. It was short. No long speech. No fancy words. Just one simple request. Request for private meeting. Urgent. High Chancellor Varric. The bridge fell silent. Elena raised an eyebrow. Looks like they're finally ready to talk. James stared at the words for a long moment. His heart felt heavy. He had waited for this. He had hoped for it. Yet, part of him hated that it had come to this. Prepare the Independents, James ordered. Plot a course for neutral space. If they want to talk, they'll meet us on our terms. Elena nodded and started giving orders to the crew. James stood quietly, watching the stars once more. The moment had come. The council had broken. The Union was falling. Now they were reaching out to the very people they had cast aside. James didn't know if he could trust Varric. He didn't know if peace was even possible. But one thing was certain. Turning away was no longer an option. The human fleet arrived in the neutral zone 2 days later. This region of space sat between Union territory and human-controlled systems. It was empty, cold, and quiet. No planets, no stations, just open space. Captain James Walker stood on the bridge of the Independence, looking out into the dark. His crew worked around him, scanning for ships. "They're here," Commander Elena Ruiz reported. James turned toward the main screen. A single Union cruiser appeared on the sensors. It was smaller than the Independence, but its colors and markings were clear. It carried the seal of the High Chancellor. The bridge crew tensed. Some whispered their doubts. Others checked weapons systems. James raised his hand. "Stand down," he ordered. "No weapons. This is a meeting, not a battle." The crew obeyed, but the tension in the air remained. A short message came through. The Union ship requested permission to send a small shuttle to dock with the Independents. James agreed. He had no reason to fear Varric. Not here. Not now. 30 minutes later, the shuttle arrived. A single figure stepped out. Varric. James watched from the upper deck as Varric walked into the meeting hall. The Dravari leader looked older than James remembered. His gray skin seemed darker, his posture less proud. His yellow eyes searched the room, but he showed no fear. James walked down the steps and stood face to face with the one who had once called humanity worthless. They did not shake hands. Varric spoke first. His voice was deep but quiet. "You knew this would happen." James nodded. "I warned you." Varric lowered his head slightly. It was not a full bow, but it was close enough. It was the first sign of respect James had ever seen from him. "The Union is falling apart," Varric admitted. "Our ships are failing. Our worlds are breaking. We need help." The words hung in the air like heavy chains. James took a breath and replied, his voice steady. "Why should we help you?" Varric clenched his jaw. His pride burned behind his eyes. But he spoke the truth. "Because if the Union falls, your people will suffer next. The pirates will not stop at our borders. The chaos will spread to your worlds. You know this." James crossed his arms. "So now we are useful again?" Varric's face tightened. "We were wrong to push you out." "I was wrong." James stared at him, searching for any sign of a trick. But Varric looked tired, beaten, honest. James walked slowly around the table between them. He stopped on the other side and leaned on the edge. "We won't come back under your rule," James said firmly. "If we return, it's on our terms. Humanity will be treated as an equal, not as servants. We will control our own ships, our own systems. We will lead, not just follow." Varric nodded once. "What else?" James leaned closer. "You will announce it. Publicly. The entire council will hear it. You will tell them that Earth is not their enemy. You will tell them we are partners. Nothing less." Varric's hands tightened into fists. For a moment, James thought he would refuse. But then Varric let out a long breath. "You have my word," Varric said quietly. James pushed away from the table and stood tall. "Then the Union has a chance." The meeting ended without celebration. No handshakes, no smiles. Both men knew this was only the beginning. As Varric left the Independence, James watched him go. He knew many challenges still lay ahead. The Union was broken, and trust would not come easy. But the first step had been taken. The next move was his. For 2 days, the Independence stayed in the neutral zone. The human fleet held position, waiting for Captain James Walker's next move. Inside the command deck, James stood with his top officers, looking over the terms he had written for the Galactic Union. "We need this in writing," James said to Elena Ruiz, who stood beside him. "Every point, every word. No more empty promises." Elena nodded. "Do you really think Varric will agree to all of this?" James looked out the window toward the empty space between their ship and Varric's cruiser. He has no choice. The document was clear. Humans would return only if the Council recognized them as equals. Humanity would keep full control of its fleets, colonies, and technology. The Union would no longer treat Earth as a tool to be used and discarded. And most importantly, Varric himself would announce this to the entire Council, publicly, without hiding his failure. Once the document was ready, James sent it across the channel to Varric's ship. For hours, there was no reply. The crew waited in silence, tension thick in the air. Finally, the Union ship signaled again. Varric requested one more face-to-face meeting. James agreed. The two men met again in the Independence's command hall. This time, Varric did not come alone. 2 of his senior advisors stood behind him, one from the Corian species, the other from the Varnock. They both looked uneasy. James understood why. If Varric accepted these terms, it would change the balance of power in the Union forever. James stood across from them, flanked by Elena and 2 fleet commanders. He didn't offer any warm welcome. This wasn't a friendly visit. It was business, serious business. Varric held the data pad with the terms displayed. He read it slowly, then looked up. "You asked for much," Varric said. "No more than we deserve," James replied calmly. "You need us. You admitted that already." The Corian advisor, a tall figure with green, bark-like skin, leaned forward. "And if we refuse?" James didn't flinch. "Then you lose everything. Your systems will keep breaking. Your worlds will fall into chaos. And when the pirates come for you, we won't stop them." The room fell silent. Varric's jaw tightened. His advisors shifted nervously. James could see them calculating the risks. But there was nothing to calculate. Without human help, the Union was finished. Varric took a slow breath and spoke. "If I agree, the Council will not trust me. Some will fight this." James leaned forward. "Then lead them. Show them that survival matters more than pride. This isn't about you. It's about saving your people and the galaxy." For a long moment, no one spoke. Varric's face showed the weight of the decision. He looked at his advisors. They gave small nods, though their faces showed fear. Finally, Varric straightened his back. He tapped the datapad and placed his seal on the document. "It is done," Varric said. His voice was rough, as if the words cost him everything. James nodded. "Prepare your council. I want that announcement made within 24 hours." Varric agreed without argument. He turned and left the room with his advisors. James watched them go, feeling the weight lift off his chest, but only slightly. The Union's survival was not guaranteed. Trust could not be forced by one agreement. It would take time, action, and proof. But this was a start. As Varric's cruiser turned away, Elena stepped up beside James. "We're really going back," she said quietly. James nodded. "Yes, but this time on our own terms." He turned to his crew. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Prepare all ships. We move at dawn." The Independence led the human fleet back into Union space. This time they did not sneak in. They came openly, with engines burning bright and transponders sending clear signals. The Council had given its word, and James Walker intended to hold them to it. The news spread fast. Across the Union, billions watched live broadcasts. They saw human ships moving through trade routes again. They heard the Council's official announcement. High Chancellor Varric, standing before the entire assembly, spoke words that many had never expected to hear. "Humanity returns to the Galactic Union," Varric said, his voice steady but heavy. "Not as servants, not as tools, but as equals. We cannot survive alone. No species can. The future of the Union depends on unity." Many council members had argued against it. Some still refused to accept it. But Varric's voice was the law. And now, humanity had the power to walk back into Union space not as outsiders, but as partners. James stood on the bridge, listening to the broadcasts as they spread across systems. He knew this was only the beginning. The human engineers wasted no time. They boarded broken Union warships, inspecting damaged systems. They worked day and night in shipyards, fixing engines, repairing shields, and restoring weapons. Old systems built by human hands came back to life under human control. Trade convoys returned to the stars, escorted by human battleships. Pirates who had once ruled the space lanes began to flee. One by one, human fleets pushed them back, clearing the routes without mercy. On Elisar Prime, where rebellion had taken control, James led the mission himself. The Independence arrived in orbit with a full strike team. James stood in the landing bay, dressed in armor, helmet under his arm. He looked at his soldiers, men and women ready to fight not for glory, but for peace. "We take back the city," James told them, "but we don't burn it. We restore it. We show them what real leadership looks like." The dropped ships landed in the ruins of Elisar, Prime's capital. Streets were filled with fire and smoke. Rebels tried to hold their ground, but they had never faced trained soldiers like this. Within hours, the city fell back under control. James walked the streets himself, meeting with local leaders, offering supplies, and rebuilding teams. This was not a show of force. This was a promise kept. Weeks passed. The Union began to breathe again. Supply chains reopened. Starports lit up with traffic. Worlds once on the edge of collapse saw new hope. The Korean food shipments resumed. Varnak's shipyards thrived with human help. The smaller species, once ignored, found new protection under the joint command of human and Union fleets. Varric and James met again, this time on Argona, not as enemies, but as leaders standing side by side. The council chamber was quiet as they addressed the members. James spoke clearly. "We did not return for power. We returned for peace. We are not here to rule. We are here to rebuild together." Some council members still looked uneasy. Trust would take time, but they listened. That was enough for now. Later, in his private quarters, James sat alone, looking out the window at the stars. He thought of everything they had been through, everything they had lost, everything they had gained. Commander Elena entered the room quietly. "It's working," she said softly. James nodded. "For now." Elena smiled slightly. "We'll hold it together, one step at a time." James leaned back in his chair, the weight of leadership pressing on his shoulders. He knew the Union was far from healed, but they were on the right path. The galaxy had changed, and this time they had a chance to build something stronger. 2 months had passed since the human fleet returned to Union space. The stars beyond Argona looked calmer now, but James Walker knew the peace was fragile. It always was. He stood on the bridge of the Independence, looking out into space as the ship hovered quietly near the council station. Everything they had worked for was finally in motion. Supplies moved through secure lanes again. Systems that had gone dark were now back online. Union fleets, now strengthened by human engineers and officers, patrolled the galaxy side by side with human ships. The people were watching. Worlds that once hated Earth now saw it as their last hope. But James knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Commander Elena Ruiz approached from behind, holding a fresh report. "Final system check complete," she said. "Trade routes are open. The Council has approved joint patrols for the next cycle." James took the report, scanned it, and gave a small nod. "Good work." Elena crossed her arms, studying him. "You don't sound happy." James let out a slow breath. "I am, but I know how easy it is to fall back into old habits. The Council may smile now, but some of them are already looking for ways to push us aside again." Elena nodded in agreement. "Let them try. We're ready this time." James turned and looked at the crew around him. Men and women who had stood by him when no one else had. They had watched the galaxy fall apart, and they had carried the burden of fixing it. Together. "We don't hold the galaxy together with speeches," James said quietly. "We hold it together with work. Real work. One system at a time. One mission at a time. We build trust, or we lose everything again." Elena smiled faintly. That's why they need us. James allowed himself a small smile. It felt strange after all the months of tension, but it felt right. Just then, a message came through on the main screen. It was Varric. Captain Walker, Varric greeted, his voice less cold than before. The Council requests your presence on Argona. They wish to honor the role of your people in rebuilding the Union. James glanced at Elena. He already knew this wasn't about medals or thanks. It was politics, nothing more. But showing up mattered. Being present mattered. Humanity had a seat now, and walking away from it would waste everything they had fought for. Tell them we'll be there, James replied. The message ended. Elena turned to prepare the transport team. James followed slowly, taking one last look at the stars outside. The galaxy had nearly torn itself apart, but here they stood, stronger than before. He knew there would be more battles ahead, not just in space, but in the halls of power, in the hearts of leaders still learning how to share control. But for the first time, James believed they had a real chance. He stepped off the bridge and walked toward the shuttle bay, ready to face the Council again. Not as a servant, not as a soldier, but as a leader. The future was uncertain, but James Walker was ready. They all were.